The winding coastal road, a ribbon of grey velvet unfurling between ancient pines and the vast glittering expanse of the Adriatic, had lulled Ilara into a quiet reverie. For hours the world outside her window had been a blur of sun-drenched hillsides and villages clinging precariously to cliffs, their terracotta roofs like scattered jewels. Now, as the afternoon softened into a long golden haze, the landscape began to change, growing more rugged, more secluded. The air, once thick with the scent of pine needles and wild herbs, now carried a distinct briny kiss of the sea. She was on her way to Villa d'Oro, a name that had whispered itself through the hallowed halls of art restoration for generations. Not a villa in the common sense, but a sprawling, fortified estate, half hidden by a dense canopy of cypress and olive trees, its existence a closely guarded secret of the European aristocracy. Ilara, a restorer of rare tapestries and ancient textiles, had been summoned to assess and potentially restore a piece rumored to be an exquisite, near-mythical Byzantine silk. A tapestry so delicate, so steeped in history, it had barely been glimpsed by modern eyes. Her driver, a taciturn man named Marco, finally turned off the main road onto a gravel path that wound steeply upwards. The crunch of tires on stone was the only sound, save for the distant cry of gulls and the rhythmic hush of waves against unseen shores. Through the gaps in the trees, Ilara caught glimpses of formidable stone walls, draped in ivy rising from the earth like a natural extension of the landscape. This was no mere holiday retreat. It felt more like a fortress, a sanctuary for forgotten beauty. The path eventually opened into a wide, circular courtyard, paved with sun-warmed cobblestones. In its center, a fountain, its stone figures softened by centuries of rain and sun, gurgled a gentle welcome. The villa itself was breathtaking, a symphony of warm, ochre-colored stone, intricate ironwork balconies and tall arched windows that seemed to gaze out over the world with quiet dignity. Bougainvillea, a riot of fuchsia and purple, cascaded down one wall, a splash of vibrant life against the ancient masonry. Marco killed the engine, and the sudden silence was profound, broken only by the fountain's murmur. Ilara took a deep breath, inhaling the mingled scents of old stone, damp earth, and blooming jasmine. A shiver, not of cold but of anticipation, traced its way down her spine. This place hummed with history, with stories untold. As she stepped out of the car, stretching limbs stiff from the long journey, a figure emerged from the shadowed archway of the main entrance. He was tall, his silhouette framed by the golden light filtering into the courtyard. Even from this distance, Ilara sensed an undeniable presence. He moved with an unhurried grace, a panther in human form, his steps making no sound on the ancient stones. He was closer now, and Ilara's breath hitched almost imperceptibly. Dark, sun-kissed skin, a strong jawline shadowed with a hint of stubble, and eyes the color of aged whiskey, deep and intelligent, met hers. His hair, a rich, dark brown, was slightly disheveled, as if he'd just run a hand through it, lending him a rugged, approachable air that belied the formality of his surroundings. He wore a linen shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a glimpse of tanned chest, and dark trousers that fit him perfectly. He exuded an aura of quiet power, a man utterly at home in this ancient, magnificent place. "Miss Hayes." His voice was a low timbre, warm and resonant, carrying a faint, pleasing accent she couldn't quite place. Perhaps Italian, perhaps something more ancient, like the stones of the villa itself. Ilara found her voice a little softer than usual. "Mr. Valerius, or Julian, I presume?" He offered a small, disarming smile, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Julian is fine. Welcome to Villa d'Oro, Ilara. I trust your journey wasn't too arduous." "Long but beautiful," she replied, her gaze lingering on his. There was a directness in his stare that was both unsettling and utterly captivating. It felt as if he saw straight through the polite facade, sensing the deep-seated passion that drove her work. He gestured towards the villa with an open hand. "Please, come inside. Marco will see to your luggage." He turned, and Ilara followed, her senses heightened, acutely aware of his proximity. The subtle scent of him, something woodsy, mingled with sea air and a hint of expensive cologne, drifted back to her, an intoxicating whisper. The interior of the villa was a revelation. It was not overtly opulent, but rather possessed a timeless elegance, a quiet grandeur that spoke of generations of careful stewardship. High ceilings, frescoed with scenes of mythological beauty, arched above her. The air was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of beeswax polish and old books. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, golden fairies. Julian led her through a vast, echoing hall, past ancient tapestries depicting hunting scenes and allegories, their colors muted by time, yet still vibrant. Her professional eye immediately noted their condition, the intricate weave, the subtle fading. She felt a thrill of anticipation, knowing that somewhere within these walls, her true calling awaited her. He stopped before a heavy, carved wooden door. "This will be your study, and the primary workroom for the tapestry is north-facing, so the light is consistent and soft throughout the day, ideal for your delicate work." He pushed the door open, revealing a spacious room. One entire wall was taken up by a series of tall, arched windows that overlooked a terraced garden sloping down towards the sea. The view was breathtaking. Manicured hedges, ancient olive trees, and beyond them, the endless, shimmering blue. In the center of the room, a large, custom-built table, clearly designed for her kind of work, stood ready. There were other tables, shelves lined with books, and a comfortable armchair by the window. The space felt both functional and profoundly peaceful. "It's perfect," Elara breathed, stepping further into the room, her fingers tracing the smooth, cool wood of the table. "Absolutely perfect, Julian. Thank you." He leaned against the doorframe, watching her with that unnervingly perceptive gaze. "We want you to be comfortable, Elara. Your work is of immense importance to us." His voice held a reverence that made her heart quicken. It wasn't just a job to him, it was a sacred trust. "When might I see it?" she asked, turning to face him, her eagerness barely contained. A slight smile played on his lips. "Patience, Elara. First you must settle in. Your rooms are just upstairs. After you've had a chance to rest and perhaps freshen up, we can discuss the logistics. And then of course the grand unveiling." His eyes held a playful glint that softened the intensity of his earlier gaze, making him even more appealing. He led her up a grand sweeping staircase, its banister polished to a deep sheen by countless hands over centuries. The silence of the villa was punctuated only by the soft pad of their footsteps. He moved with an innate quietness, as if accustomed to respecting the ancient stillness of the house. Her rooms, a suite of 3, were at the end of a long, sunlit corridor. The bedroom was spacious, with high ceilings and a large, 4-poster bed draped in crisp white linen. A delicate antique writing desk sat by a window, offering a partial view of the sea through a filigree of ancient tree branches. The adjoining bathroom was surprisingly modern, a sleek blend of marble and glass, a testament to careful, respectful renovation. "I hope these are to your liking," Julian said, his voice softer now, almost intimate in the confines of the bedroom. He stood just inside the doorway, his presence filling the space, making the air crackle with a subtle energy. "They're exquisite, Julian," Elara replied, walking to the window, letting her fingers brush against the cool glass. "Far more than I expected." He moved closer, stopping a respectful distance behind her, yet she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "We like to ensure our guests are well cared for, especially those entrusted with our treasures." His words were formal, but the underlying tone held a warmth, an unspoken invitation. She turned from the window, finding him closer than she'd anticipated. His eyes, those deep pools of whiskey, held hers captive. The air grew thick, charged with an invisible current. She felt a blush creep up her neck, a surprising reaction for someone usually so composed. I'm truly grateful," she managed, her voice a little breathy. He offered another one of those slow, captivating smiles. "Good. There's a small dining room on the ground floor. We usually have dinner at 8. Please join me." It would be an honor to hear more about your work, and for you to tell me what you might need during your stay." "I'd like that very much," Elara said, her gaze still locked with his. The thought of spending an evening in his company, sharing conversation over a meal, sent a delicious flutter through her. "Excellent," he said, his voice dropping slightly, a subtle shift in tone that sent another shiver through her. He held her gaze for another moment, then, with a slight nod, turned and left the room, leaving behind only the lingering scent of him and the profound silence of the villa. Elara stood for a long moment, listening to the faint echo of his footsteps receding down the corridor. Her heart was beating a little faster than usual. She closed her eyes, trying to recapture the scent, the feel of his presence. This was going to be an assignment unlike any other. She unpacked slowly, her mind replaying the encounter with Julian. He was not what she had expected. She had envisioned a distant, perhaps elderly, patron, certainly not a man whose mere presence could set her senses alight. There was a quiet intensity about him, a sophisticated ruggedness that was incredibly alluring. After arranging her few personal items and laying out her professional tools, she decided to explore. The villa beckoned, a labyrinth of history and hidden beauty. She wandered through drawing rooms filled with antique furniture, libraries overflowing with leather-bound tomes that smelled of parchment and dust, and sun-drenched conservatories where exotic plants thrived. Each room told a story, each object whispered of lives lived within these walls. She found herself in a long gallery, lined with portraits of ancestors, their eyes following her as she passed. The light here was softer, filtered through narrow, tall windows. She paused before a particularly striking portrait of a woman with fierce, intelligent eyes and a cascade of dark, unruly hair. Not unlike Julian's. There was a certain proud elegance in her posture, a hint of defiance in her gaze. Elara wondered if she was an ancestress of Julian's, perhaps an echo of his own strong spirit. As evening approached, the villa transformed. The golden light of the setting sun painted the walls in hues of apricot and rose. The air grew cooler, and a gentle breeze, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine, drifted through open windows. The distant sound of the sea became more pronounced, a constant, soothing rhythm. Elara chose a simple, elegant dress for dinner, a deep sapphire blue that complemented her eyes. She brushed out her long, dark hair, letting it fall in soft waves around her shoulders. A touch of lipstick, a hint of perfume. She wanted to feel both comfortable and appropriately dressed for the occasion. Descending the grand staircase, she felt a delicious blend of anticipation and nerves. The silence of the villa was different now, not just empty but expectant. As she reached the bottom, she saw him. Julian was waiting for her in the main hall, standing by one of the arched windows, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He had changed into a dark, tailored jacket over a crisp white shirt. The cuffs unbuttoned and rolled back slightly, revealing strong forearms. He looked even more striking, the formality of his attire only enhancing his inherent masculinity. He turned as she approached, and his gaze swept over her, a slow, appreciative journey that made her skin tingle. His eyes lingered for a moment on her lips, then met hers, and a silent spark passed between them. "Elara," he said, his voice a low murmur, "you look exquisite." A warm flush spread across her cheeks. "Thank you, Julian. You look very distinguished." He chuckled softly, a rich, warm sound. "Distinguished? I prefer comfortable, but I appreciate the sentiment." He gestured to a small, intimate dining room she hadn't yet discovered. "Shall we?" The dining room was beautiful, lit by a flickering candlelight that cast dancing shadows on the walls. A small table, set for two, was laden with delicate china, glistening silver, and a single fragrant rose in a crystal vase. The atmosphere was one of understated romance, a private world carved out within the ancient Villa de Darle. Julian pulled out her chair for her, his hand brushing briefly against her back as she sat. The contact was fleeting, yet sent a jolt through her, a quickening of her pulse. He took his own seat opposite her, and the distance between them felt both vast and impossibly small. A discreet maid, a quiet woman with kind eyes, served them. The food was simple but exquisite. Fresh local seafood, perfectly prepared pasta, and a salad bursting with garden-fresh herbs. They spoke of the villa's history, of the challenges of preserving such an ancient structure, and of Ilara's work. Julian was an attentive listener, his gaze rarely leaving her face. He asked insightful questions, demonstrating a genuine interest in the intricate details of textile restoration, the science of preservation, the stories hidden within the threads. Ilara found herself opening up, sharing her passion with an ease she rarely felt with strangers. "It's more than just repair, isn't it?" he mused, swirling the ruby-red wine in his glass. "It's about understanding the past, about whispering life back into something that has almost faded." "Exactly," she said, meeting his gaze across the flickering candlelight. "It's about respecting the hands that wove it, the lives it witnessed, the stories it holds. You become a part of that continuum." "A beautiful sentiment," he said, his eyes darkening slightly, a warmth spreading through them. "I suspect you bring a unique sensitivity to your craft, Ilara." The compliment, delivered with such sincerity, made her heart throb. She felt seen, truly seen by this man. As the meal progressed, their conversation drifted from professional to more personal topics, though always with a veil of polite reserve. They discovered shared interests in literature, a mutual love for the sea, and a quiet appreciation for the solitude this remote corner of the world offered. Later, over small cups of rich dark espresso, Julian led her to a comfortable salon, its large windows open to the night air. The sounds of crickets chirping and the rhythmic crash of waves filled the room. A fire had been lit in the hearth, casting a warm, inviting glow. He settled onto a deep leather sofa, gesturing for her to take the armchair opposite. But Ilara found herself drawn to the window, gazing out at the ink-black sea, silvered by a sliver of moon. "The night here is profound," she whispered, almost to herself. Julian rose and came to stand beside her, his proximity a potent, silent force. "It is. The stars seem closer, don't they? And the sea a constant reminder of something vast and unknowable." She turned her head slightly, her gaze brushing against his profile. The firelight played across his features, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the curve of his lips. She could feel the warmth of his body, the subtle scent of him, enveloping her. The air between them hummed, thick with unspoken currents. "I'm looking forward to seeing the tapestry," she said, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground, though her voice was softer than she intended. "And you will very soon," he promised, his voice a low rumble. He turned fully to face her, his hand reaching out, not quite touching her, but hovering inches from her arm. The gesture was tentative, yet held an electrifying promise. "But for tonight, let the mysteries of the villa, and perhaps a few others, remain." His eyes held a deep, knowing glint, a challenge and an invitation all at once. The intensity of his gaze was almost overwhelming. Ilara felt a blush creep up her neck again, a fire igniting in her belly. Every nerve ending seemed to awaken, acutely aware of him, of the space between them, of the possibilities that hung in the air like moonlit mist. He finally lowered his hand, though his eyes never left hers. "It's been a long day for you, Ilara. Perhaps it's time to rest." His words were a polite dismissal, yet his tone, the lingering warmth in his gaze, told a different story. She nodded, her throat suddenly dry. "Yes, I suppose it is." He walked her back to the foot of the grand staircase. The silence was charged, punctuated only by the distant murmur of the sea. As she reached the first step, she paused, turning to face him. "Good night, Julian," she whispered. He took a step closer, his eyes dark and unreadable in the dim light. "Good night, Ilara. Dream sweetly." His voice was a low caress. He raised a hand, and for a heart-stopping moment, she thought he would touch her cheek. But his fingers merely brushed against the stray tendril of hair near her temple, a feather-light touch that sent a shiver through her entire being. Then, he let his hand drop, and the moment was gone. She ascended the stairs, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, acutely aware of his gaze, following her until she disappeared around the bend of the staircase. Once in her room, the silence was almost deafening. She walked to the open window, leaning against the cool stone frame, gazing out at the moon-kissed landscape. The air was cool against her heated skin, but it did little to quell the heat that had flared within her. His touch, though fleeting, had ignited something dormant, something she hadn't realized she was missing. The way his eyes had held hers, the warmth in his voice, the subtle, unspoken current that had flowed between them all evening. It was more than just attraction, it was a profound sense of recognition, as if they had known each other in another life, or were destined to meet in this one, in this ancient, timeless place. She undressed slowly, her fingers lingering on the sapphire fabric of her dress, remembering the way his eyes had admired her. As she slipped into the cool sheets of the four-poster bed, the scent of him, an imagined whisper of wood and sea, seemed to cling to her. She closed her eyes, and Julian's face, his intense gaze, his captivating smile filled her mind. The villa, the tapestry, her work, all faded into the background, replaced by the potent, undeniable presence of the man who owned this place, and who, with a single look, had awakened something profound within her. The night was young, and the whispers of Villa d'Oro had just begun to speak. The night was young, and the whispers of Villa d'Oro had just begun to speak. Ilara lay on her back, the cool silk of the sheets, a stark contrast to the heat that had bloomed within her chest. The air, heavy with the scent of jasmine from the garden below, and the fainter, more elusive aroma of old wood and the distant sea, seemed to vibrate with an unspoken promise. She traced the intricate patterns of the canopy above her, her mind a swirl of images. Julian's dark eyes, the curve of his smile, the effortless grace of his movements. He was a man carved from the very essence of this place, ancient, powerful, beautiful, and utterly captivating. Her hands drifted, almost unconsciously, to her own skin, feeling the delicate pulse at her wrist, the gentle swell of her breast beneath the fine cotton of her nightgown. It felt as though a dormant part of her had been stirred, a deep, resonant chord struck by his presence. She, who had devoted her life to the quiet beauty of art, to the meticulous restoration of history, found herself suddenly, thrillingly, alive to the raw, vibrant energy of the present. The intellectual pursuit of beauty had always been her solace. Now, a different kind of beauty, a far more visceral and immediate one, beckoned. A soft knock at her door, unexpected and gentle, sent a jolt through her. Her breath hitched. Could it be? Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird seeking release. She sat up, her senses heightened, every nerve ending alert. Ilara! Julian's voice, a low rumble that seemed to caress her name, drifted through the wood. Are you still awake? For a moment, she couldn't speak, her throat tight with anticipation. She swung her legs out of bed, her bare feet meeting the cool marble floor. The moonlight, silvering the edges of her room, seemed to follow her as she moved towards the door. Yes, she managed, her voice a little breathy. Julian? Forgive my intrusion, he said, and she could hear the smile in his tone. But I found myself unable to sleep. The night has a certain magic, doesn't it? I thought perhaps you might share a nightcap with me if you're not too tired. A nightcap. A simple invitation, yet it felt laden with so much more. It was a bridge, extending across the chasm of their brief acquaintance, inviting her into his world, into the intimate quiet of the night. She hesitated. A fleeting thought of propriety, of the unspoken rules of guest and host. But the thought was quickly swept away by a stronger current, the undeniable pull she felt towards him, the hunger for his company, for whatever this nascent connection might become. I'd like that very much, she said, reaching for the silk robe draped over a chair. She opened the door just a crack, peeking out. He stood there, framed by the softly lit hallway, a vision of effortless elegance. He wore a dark open-neck shirt that revealed a hint of his collarbone and the strong line of his throat, and trousers that clung to his lean frame. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd run a hand through it, and his eyes, dark and luminous, met hers with an intensity that stole her breath. A faint, masculine scent, something like sandalwood and sea salt, reached her, intoxicating and alluring. Come, he said, extending a hand, his smile soft and inviting. the terrace overlooking the sea. It's truly magnificent under the stars. She slipped out, closing the door behind her, and her hand found his. His skin was warm, firm, and the touch sent a shiver through her, a delicious tremor that ran from her fingertips all the way to her core. He led her down the grand staircase, the marble cool beneath her bare feet, the silence of the villa profound, broken only by the soft brush of their steps and the distant murmur of the waves. They emerged onto a vast stone terrace, bathed in the ethereal glow of the moonlight. The air was soft, caressing, carrying the heady perfume of night-blooming jasmine and the salty tang of the Tyrrhenian Sea. Below them the waters shimmered, a vast expanse of dark sapphire studded with the scattered diamonds of distant fishing boats. The villa, a sleeping giant behind them, seemed to hold its breath, watching. A small table was set with 2 crystal glasses and a decanter of amber liquid, a fine aged brandy, Elara guessed, by its rich, inviting aroma. Julian poured for them both, his movements fluid and graceful, and handed her a glass. Their fingers brushed again, sending another spark through her. "To the beauty of the night," he murmured, his gaze holding hers as he raised his glass. "To unexpected magic," she countered, her voice barely a whisper. They sipped the rich, warm liquid, its heat spreading through her, mirroring the warmth that was blossoming within her. They stood for a long moment in comfortable silence, simply taking in the breathtaking vista. The vastness of the world feeling both immense and intimately contained within this moonlit space. "Tell me," Julian said, turning to lean against the balustrade, his profile sharp against the night sky. "What brought you to the world of textile restoration? It seems such a delicate, painstaking art." Elara found herself easily drawn into conversation, the brandy warming her tongue, the sound of his voice a balm. She spoke of the intricate threads of history, the stories whispered by ancient fabrics, the quiet satisfaction of bringing beauty back to life. She watched his face as she spoke, fascinated by the way his eyes softened, the subtle shifts in his expression, the genuine interest that shone in them. He listened not just with his ears, but with his entire being, his attention a palpable, seductive force. "And you, Julian?" she asked, emboldened by the hour in the brandy. "What is it like to live amidst such history, such beauty, to be the guardian of Villadora?" He smiled, a wistful, enigmatic curve of his lips. "It is a privilege, and at times a burden. This villa, she demands much. She has seen centuries of life, of passion, of sorrow. She breathes with stories. And sometimes I feel as though I am merely another thread in her tapestry, woven in for a brief span." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the moon-drenched gardens. "But it is a thread I wouldn't trade. There's a profound connection to something greater than oneself, a sense of continuity, and the beauty, it never ceases to inspire." His eyes met hers again, and this time, the intensity was almost unbearable. "Like your tapestry, Elara, you breathe life back into it, yes? You seek to understand its whispers, its secrets to restore its original glory." "Yes," she agreed, her voice soft. "To understand its heart." "And what of your own heart, Elara?" he asked, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register. He took a step closer, reducing the small space between them. The scent of him, clean and masculine, enveloped her. "Does it whisper secrets too?" Her breath caught. The air crackled with unspoken desires, with the potent electricity that had been building between them since the moment their eyes had first met. She felt a blush creep up her neck, but she didn't look away. His gaze was a magnetic force, drawing her in, stripping away her inhibitions. "Perhaps," she whispered, her own eyes searching his, seeking answers to questions she hadn't yet dared to form. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the delicate curve of her jawline. The touch was light, feather-soft, yet it ignited a wildfire within her. Her skin tingled, and a delicious warmth spread through her veins. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering close for a brief, exquisite moment. "You are a woman of immense grace, Elara," he murmured, his thumb stroking her cheekbone, sending shivers down her spine. "And a rare beauty." His words, spoken with such sincerity and tenderness, were a balm to her soul, a potent elixir that dissolved all her carefully constructed defenses. She opened her eyes, and found his gaze fixed on her lips, a silent invitation hanging in the air. Her heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the night. She wanted him, with an urgency that startled her. Wanted to feel his lips on hers, to taste him, to lose herself in the promise of his touch. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he leaned in. Her eyes drifted closed again, anticipation a sweet ache in her chest. She felt the warmth of his breath on her skin, the subtle shift of air as he drew nearer. And then, finally, his lips, soft and hesitant at first, met hers. It was a kiss of pure tenderness, a gentle exploration, a question. She responded instantly, her lips parting slightly, inviting him deeper. The gentleness gave way to a burgeoning passion, a hungry need that had been simmering beneath the surface all evening. His hand moved from her jaw to cup the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair, pulling her closer, deepening the kiss. His mouth was warm, firm, tasting of brandy, and something uniquely Julian. A clean, masculine flavor that was utterly intoxicating. She felt herself melting into him, her body softening, yielding. Her hands, almost of their own accord, found their way to his chest, gripping the fine fabric of his shirt, feeling the strong beat of his heart beneath her fingertip. The kiss deepened, becoming more insistent, more demanding. He shifted, his body pressing lightly against hers, and she felt the hard planes of his chest, the lean strength of his thighs. A low moan escaped her, a soft, involuntary sound of pleasure. She felt a delicious weakness in her knees, a yearning that spread through her entire being. He broke the kiss reluctantly, pulling back just enough for their foreheads to touch, their breaths mingling in the cool night air. His eyes, dark and heavy-lidded, gazed into hers, reflecting the same raw desire she knew was mirrored in her own. "Ilara," he breathed, his voice husky, "you awaken something within me I had thought long dormant." "And you, Julian," she whispered, her voice trembling, "you stir my very soul." He kissed her again, this time with a fierce, possessive hunger, a silent declaration of his desire. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him, leaving no doubt as to the effect she had on him. She reveled in the sensation, in the intoxicating thrill of being held so close, so intimately. Her fingers threaded into his hair, pulling gently, urging him closer still. The world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, enveloped in the moonlight and the scent of the sea. The whispers of the villa were no longer just the rustling of ancient secrets, but the intoxicating murmur of shared desire. He lifted her effortlessly into his arms, a gasp escaping her lips as she instinctively wrapped her legs around his waist, her arms around his neck. She felt the powerful flex of his muscles, the steady rhythm of his heart against her breast. He carried her away from the balustrade, away from the wide expanse of the terrace, back into the hushed interior of the villa. He moved with a sure, unhurried grace, carrying her through dimly lit corridors, past portraits of stern-faced ancestors and tapestries that seemed to watch their progress with ancient knowing eyes. Her face was buried in the crook of his neck, inhaling his scent, feeling the warmth of his skin. He didn't take her back to her room. Instead, he carried her to a different part of the villa, a wing she hadn't yet explored. He pushed open a heavy carved wooden door, revealing a room bathed in the soft, intimate glow of lamplight. It was his chamber. She knew it instantly. The scent of him was stronger here, mingled with the faint aroma of leather and old books. A magnificent four-poster bed dominated the room, draped in rich, dark fabrics. A large fireplace, unlit, stood against one wall, and a low, comfortable armchair was positioned by a window that overlooked a more secluded part of the garden. He set her down gently beside the bed, his hands still on her waist, his gaze never leaving hers. Her robe, slightly askew, revealed the delicate lace of her nightgown beneath, hinting at the curves of her body. His eyes lingered there for a moment, a silent admiration that made her feel exquisitely vulnerable and desired. "Elara," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you sure?" She reached up, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "More than I've ever been about anything, Julian." With a soft groan, he lowered his head, capturing her lips once more. This kiss was deeper, hungrier, a prelude to the intimate dance they were about to embark upon. His hands moved, untying the sash of her silk robe, letting it fall silently to the floor, a pool of shimmering fabric around her feet. She stood before him in her nightgown, the delicate lace and fine cotton doing little to conceal the rising heat of her body, the taut peaks of her breasts. His eyes devoured her, a slow, appreciative gaze that made her skin tingle with anticipation. His fingers, surprisingly deft, began to unbutton his shirt, one button at a time. Her gaze followed the movement, mesmerized by the slow reveal of his broad chest, the taut expanse of his skin, the dark hair that feathered across his pectorals before narrowing to a tantalizing line that disappeared beneath his trousers. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his bare skin, feeling the warmth, the smooth tautness of him. He shivered at her touch, a barely perceptible tremor that thrilled her. When his shirt was fully open, he shrugged it off, letting it fall to the floor. He was magnificent, sculpted and powerful, a testament to strength and grace. Her eyes lingered on the lean lines of his abdomen, the powerful curve of his shoulders, the strong column of his neck. He reached for her then, his hands gently pulling down the straps of her nightgown, letting the soft fabric drift down her body, gathering at her feet. She stood before him, completely exposed, completely vulnerable, yet feeling an exhilarating sense of liberation. His gaze was reverent, adoring, making her feel beautiful and desired in a way she never had before. He pulled her into his embrace, their naked bodies meeting for the first time. The shock of skin against skin, the warmth, the softness of her against the hard planes of his body, was an exquisite sensation. A soft gasp escaped her lips as she pressed herself against him, feeling the undeniable proof of his desire. He cradled her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. His eyes, dark and intense, held hers. "You are breathtaking, Elara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Then, slowly, deliberately, he lowered her onto the bed. The sheets were cool, soft against her heated skin. He followed her down, his body covering hers, supporting her weight with his arms. His lips found hers again, a long, languid kiss that promised depths yet to be explored. His hands moved over her body, exploring every curve, every hollow, every plane. Her skin came alive under his touch, tingling, aching for more. She arched into him, her fingers tangling in his hair, her nails gently raking his scalp, urging him onward. He kissed her neck, her collarbone, trailing a path of fire down to the swell of her breasts. She moaned softly as his lips found her nipple, drawing it gently into his mouth, his tongue swirling around it, sending shivers of pure pleasure through her. She gasped, her back arching, her body a symphony of sensation. Her hands moved over his back, feeling the ripple of muscles beneath her touch, the warmth of his skin. She felt herself unraveling, her carefully constructed composure dissolving into a pool of pure sensation. The world outside the villa, her work, her meticulous life, all faded away, replaced by the primal, exquisite reality of Julian's touch. He moved lower, his lips and tongue tracing a path down her abdomen, eliciting gasps and shivers with every touch. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts, her body alive with a desperate, burgeoning need. She felt herself on the precipice, teetering on the edge of something immense, something glorious. When he finally positioned himself above her, his eyes, dark and knowing, met hers. The intensity of his gaze was a silent question, a shared understanding. He leaned down, whispering against her lips, "Elara, my beautiful Elara." Then, with a gentle, deliberate movement, he entered her. A gasp tore from her throat, a mix of surprise and pure, unadulterated pleasure. He filled her completely, exquisitely, a sensation so profound it stole her breath. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him deeper, her body instinctively arching to meet his rhythm. He moved slowly at first, a languid, sensual dance, allowing her body to adjust, to revel in the fullness of him. Each thrust was a wave of pure sensation, building, intensifying. She closed her eyes, her mind reeling, her body consumed by the delicious friction, the exquisite pressure. Her hands gripped his shoulders, her fingers digging into the taut muscles as the rhythm quickened, becoming more urgent, more primal. She met his thrusts with her own, her hips rising to meet his, a symphony of entwined bodies, a primal dance of desire. The world narrowed to the feel of his skin against hers, the sound of their mingled breaths, the rhythmic creak of the old bed, the whispered reassurances and pleas that escaped their lips. She felt herself soaring higher and higher on a tide of pure, unadulterated pleasure. The tension built, a sweet, unbearable ache, pulling her tighter and tighter. She clung to him, her body trembling, her senses overwhelmed. And then, with a final powerful thrust, she shattered, a wave of incandescent pleasure washing over her, shaking her to her very core. A cry escaped her, lost against his shoulder as he, too, groaned, his body tensing, shuddering with his own release. They lay entwined, their breaths ragged, their bodies slick with sweat, the echoes of their shared climax still vibrating between them. He held her close, pressing a soft kiss to her temple, his heart hammering against hers. Slowly, gradually, their breathing evened out. The initial intensity gave way to a profound sense of peace, a deep, abiding connection that transcended the physical. He shifted, pulling her closer still, tucking her head onto his shoulder, his arm draped possessively over her waist. She lay there, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers, the soft brush of his hair against her cheek. The moon still cast its silver glow through the window, but now the room felt different, imbued with a new intimacy, a shared vulnerability, a silent understanding. She felt utterly content, utterly cherished. This man, Julian, had not only stirred a dormant passion within her, but he had opened a door to a part of herself she hadn't known existed. He had seen beyond the meticulous restorer, beyond the quiet artist, to the woman aching for connection, for passion, for a love that felt as ancient and enduring as the villa itself. She drifted off to sleep in his arms, the scent of him, the warmth of him, a comforting cocoon. The whispers of Villa Doro now seemed to speak not of history alone, but of a future, of a bond forged in the quiet magic of a moonlit night, promising a tapestry yet to be woven, threads of passion and devotion stretching into the dawn. When she woke, the room was awash in the soft, golden light of dawn. She was still in Julian's arms, her body spooned against his breath warm against her hair. She stirred, stretching languidly, and felt him shift behind her. "Good morning, Mimiakarai," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep, his lips brushing the sensitive skin behind her ear. A warmth spread through her, a blush that had nothing to do with embarrassment, and everything to do with the exquisite tenderness of the moment. She turned in his arms, her eyes meeting his. They were soft, filled with a gentle affection that made her heart ache with a sweet, profound joy. "Good morning, Julian," she whispered, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, feeling the slight stubble of his beard. He smiled, a slow, sensual curve of his lips that made her heart flutter. He kissed her then, a long, lingering kiss that was both a greeting and a promise. It was a kiss that spoke of shared intimacy, of a night spent in passionate abandon, and of the quiet, hopeful beginning of something new. They lay there for a while, simply holding each other, enjoying the quiet intimacy of the morning. The world outside seemed to be waking up around them, the distant calls of gulls, the gentle rustle of leaves in the garden, the faint, sweet scent of coffee brewing somewhere in the villa. Eventually Julian stirred, pressing one last kiss to her forehead. "As much as I would love to spend the entire day like this," he said, a hint of regret in his voice. "The villa, unfortunately, has its demands. And I suspect your tapestry awaits." She smiled, a warmth blooming in her chest. "Yes, it does. But now," she added, her gaze lingering on his, "I think I'll see it with new eyes." He chuckled, a low, rich sound that vibrated through her. "As do I, Alara. As do I." He rose from the bed, moving with the same effortless grace she had first admired. He pulled on a fresh shirt, leaving it unbuttoned for now, and ran a hand through his dark hair. He was still a vision, even in the casual disarray of morning. She watched him, a profound sense of wonder settling over her. This was the man who had turned her ordered world upside down, who had awakened her to a passion she hadn't known she possessed. And as she lay in his bed, in the heart of his ancient villa, she knew with an absolute certainty that this was just the beginning. The whispers of Villa d'Oro had indeed spoken, and they had spoken of love. And Alara, for the first time in a long time, felt utterly, thrillingly alive. He stirred then, a low murmur escaping his lips as his eyes fluttered open, meeting hers. A slow smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes, a smile that held all the warmth of the Tuscan sun and the quiet certainty of dawn. "Buongiorno, mia carai," he whispered, his voice still thick with sleep, a delicious rumble in his chest. He reached for her, his arm coiling around her waist, pulling her closer until her back was spooned against his front, her bottom nestling perfectly into the curve of his hips. His hand found hers, intertwining their fingers, and he pressed a soft kiss to her hair, just behind her ear, sending shivers down her spine. "Buongiorno," she replied, her voice huskier than usual, a testament to the night's revelry and the profound peace that had followed. She could feel the steady beat of his heart against her back, the warmth of his skin, the scent of him, a mix of citrus, cypress, and something uniquely Julian. It was an intoxicating blend that was quickly becoming her new favorite aroma. They lay like that for a long time, the world outside their gilded cocoons slowly awakening. The first rays of sun began to filter through the ancient shutters, painting stripes of golden light across the stone floor. Birdsong drifted in from the gardens, a sweet symphony of chirps and trills. It was a morning unlike any Alara had ever experienced in her meticulously organized London flat, a morning that felt less like the start of a new day, and more like the opening of a new chapter, in a story she hadn't known she was destined to live. Eventually, Julian's hand moved, trailing softly over her hip, up her side, and finally resting just beneath her breast, his thumb brushing lightly over the sensitive skin. The subtle touch was enough to reignite the embers of desire, a gentle warmth spreading through her. "Hungry?" he murmured, his lips brushing her earlobe. Alara smiled, a soft, contented sound. "For what, exactly?" He chuckled, a rich, deep sound that vibrated through her. "Breakfast in tesoro, though I confess I have other appetites too." He squeezed her gently, and she felt the undeniable evidence of his own reawakened desire pressing against her. "I might be persuaded by a good espresso," she teased, turning in his arms until she faced him, her eyes locking with his. The depth of emotion she saw there, adoration, tenderness, a burgeoning love, stole her breath. He leaned in, his lips brushing hers, a feather-light touch that promised more. "Espresso it is, then. And perhaps a plate of fresh fruit, warm pastries from the village bakery, and a side of undivided attention." "Sounds perfect," she whispered, before closing the small distance between them, sealing their morning with a kiss that was slow, deep, and utterly tender, a promise of all the beautiful mornings yet to come. They rose eventually, moving with a languid grace that spoke of shared intimacy. Julian led her to a sun-drenched terrace overlooking the sprawling vineyards, where a small table was already set. A silver pot of rich, dark coffee steamed invitingly, alongside baskets piled high with crusty bread, sweet fig jam, and fragrant peaches still dewy from the morning. A vase held a single, perfect white rose, its petals unfurling in the gentle breeze. "My housekeeper, Signor Rossi, is a master of anticipation," Julian said, pouring her coffee, his eyes twinkling. She knows the rhythms of the villa, the whispers of its guests. Ilara felt a blush creep up her neck. Signora Rossi, she realized, probably knew everything. But the thought didn't bring discomfort, only a strange sense of belonging. This ancient villa, with its secrets and its warmth, was already beginning to feel like home. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily, a comfortable blend of light-hearted banter and deeper revelations. Ilara learned more about Julian's life here, the challenges and joys of maintaining the estate, his passion for winemaking. That was as much an art as it was a science. He spoke of the land, of his ancestors who had walked these same paths, of the sense of connection he felt to every stone and every vine. "It's a demanding life," he admitted, gesturing to the rolling hills green and vibrant under the morning sun. "But it's also incredibly rewarding. There's a certain honesty to it, a direct link to the earth." Ilara found herself captivated, not just by his words, but by the quiet intensity in his eyes when he spoke of his home. She in turn found herself opening up, sharing details about her meticulously structured life in London, her career as an architect, the precise logic and ordered beauty she found in design. "My world is very contained," she explained, stirring sugar into her coffee. "Lines, angles, practicalities. This," she waved a hand at the panoramic vista, "this is a different kind of beauty. Wilder. More ancient." Julian reached across the table, his fingers gently covering hers. "Perhaps your contained world was just waiting for a little wildness to break through." His gaze was warm, knowing, and it sent a flutter through her stomach. After breakfast, Julian proposed a tour of the estate. He changed into a lightweight linen shirt and trousers, while Ilara opted for a simple sundress, its light fabric a welcome contrast to her usual tailored attire. As they walked, hand in hand, through the meticulously kept gardens, the air alive with the scent of jasmine and rosemary, Ilara felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. He showed her hidden grottos adorned with moss-covered statues, fountains where water trickled into ancient stone basins, and rose gardens bursting with vibrant hues. Each corner of the villa seemed to hold a story, and Julian, with his quiet charm, was an eloquent storyteller. He pointed out centuries-old olive trees, their gnarled trunks testament to their endurance, and explained the delicate process of pressing their oil. Then they ventured into the vineyards, the rows of grapevines stretching in neat lines across the undulating hills. The sun was higher now, warming their skin, and the air hummed with the buzz of insects. Julian spoke of the terroir, the nuances of the soil, the different varietals he cultivated. Ilara listened intently, fascinated by the depth of his knowledge and the passion that infused every word. "Each vine has its own personality, its own challenges," he said, gently plucking a leaf and twirling it between his fingers. "And each vintage tells a story of the year it was born, of sun, of rain, of patience." He looked at her then, his eyes holding a deeper meaning. "Much like people, I suppose. Each of us, a unique vintage." Ilara felt a blush rise to her cheeks. She understood the unspoken comparison. She was a different vintage than he was used to, perhaps. And yet, she felt a strange, undeniable compatibility. They paused by a small stone-built tasting room, nestled amidst the vines. Julian disappeared inside for a moment, emerging with 2 crystal glasses and a bottle of deep ruby red wine. "A special vintage," he said, pouring the wine, its aroma rich with notes of cherry and earth. "From the oldest vines on the estate." They sat on a stone bench, sipping the exquisite wine, the panoramic view of the Tuscan countryside stretching out before them. Ilara felt a deep contentment she hadn't realized she was missing. Her life in London, with its demanding schedule and urban pulse, felt impossibly distant. Here, time seemed to slow, to expand, allowing space for connection, for simply being. "It's breathtaking, Julian," she murmured, her voice soft with emotion. "This place, it's truly magical." He smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "It has a way of getting under your skin, doesn't it? The whispers of Villa d'Oro?" Later, they returned to the villa, the afternoon sun casting long shadows. They spent a quiet hour in the library, a vast room filled with leather-bound books and the scent of old paper. Julian read aloud from an ancient Italian poem, his rich baritone voice making the lyrical words sing, while Alara, curled in a plush armchair, simply listened, letting the beauty of the language wash over her. It was a simple act, yet profoundly intimate, a shared moment of quiet joy that spoke volumes about their growing connection. As evening approached, the air cooled, taking on the heady scent of night-blooming jasmine. Julian had arranged for a private dinner on a secluded part of the terrace, lit by flickering candlelight and the soft glow of the rising moon. The meal was exquisite: fresh pasta with truffles, perfectly grilled sea bass, and a delicate panna cotta, each dish a testament to Signora Rossi's culinary artistry. But it was the conversation that truly nourished Alara. They spoke of dreams, of fears, of the paths that had led them to this unexpected meeting. Alara found herself confessing a long-held desire to create something truly impactful, beyond the confines of commercial architecture, a yearning for art that she had kept carefully hidden beneath layers of pragmatism. Julian listened with an empathetic ear, his gaze never leaving hers. "You have a remarkable eye, Alara," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I saw it in the way you looked at the villa, at the lines of the landscape. Don't let practicality silence your artistry." His belief in her, so readily given, touched a chord deep within her. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced often, this sense of being truly seen, truly understood. The wine flowed, enhancing the warmth between them, loosening their tongues and softening any lingering inhibitions. The romantic tension, a palpable hum beneath the surface throughout the day, began to rise, swirling around them like the fragrant evening air. Their hands would brush across the table, their eyes would meet and hold, each glance a silent conversation, a deepening promise. As the last stars began to dot the inky sky, Julian rose and offered Alara his hand. "Shall we?" he murmured, his thumb stroking the back of her hand, sending a delicious shiver through her. She nodded, her heart thrumming in anticipation. The walk back to his bedroom felt charged, every step bringing them closer to the inevitable, the wonderful, the exquisite. The villa itself seemed to hold its breath, its ancient stones absorbing the rising tide of their passion. Once inside the dimly lit room, the scent of lavender and Julian's own masculine aroma filled the air. He didn't rush, his movements deliberate, tender. He led her to the expansive window, where the moonlight poured in, bathing the room in a silvery glow. From here, she could see the silhouette of the cypress trees, the gentle curve of the hills, the distant twinkle of a village light. It was a view that felt timeless, eternal. He turned her to face him, his hands gently framing her face, his thumbs tracing the line of her jaw. His eyes, dark and intense in the moonlight, searched hers. "Alara," he whispered, his voice a low, melodic caress. "You are truly beautiful." His words, simple yet profound, filled her with a warmth that spread through every fiber of her being. She reached up, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw, feeling the slight stubble beneath her fingertips. "And you, Julian?" she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "Ah, magnificent." He leaned in, slowly, allowing her ample time to respond, to pull away if she wished. But her body yearned for his, her soul reaching out to meet his. Her eyes fluttered closed as his lips finally met hers, a kiss that was both gentle and hungry, a question and an answer all at once. It began softly, a tender exploration, before deepening, becoming more urgent, more demanding. His hands moved from her face, gliding down her arms, over her shoulders, and then slowly, tantalizingly, to the zipper of her dress. He unfastened it with practiced ease, the whisper of the fabric as it yielded a soft counterpoint to their escalating desire. The dress slipped from her shoulders, pooling at her feet, leaving her in only her delicate lace lingerie, bathed in the moonlight. Alara felt no shame, no self-consciousness, only a thrilling vulnerability. Julian's gaze swept over her, a look of profound admiration and desire, making her feel utterly cherished. He reached out, his fingers tracing the delicate lace of her bra, the curve of her breast, sending delicious tingles through her. "Bellissima," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. She in turn reached for his shirt, her fingers fumbling slightly with the buttons, her impatience a delightful rush. He helped her, his hands guiding hers, until the linen shirt was unbuttoned and she could push it off his broad shoulders. Her hands instinctively went to his chest, feeling the warmth of his skin, the taut muscles, the soft hair. She pressed a kiss to his collarbone, tasting the salt of his skin, inhaling his intoxicating scent. He guided her backward, slowly, until the edge of the bed met her calves. They sank onto the mattress, their bodies entwining, a symphony of touch and sensation. His lips moved from her mouth to her neck, trailing fiery kisses down her throat, eliciting soft moans from deep within her. His hands were everywhere, exploring, caressing, awakening every nerve ending. He unclasped her bra, the lace falling away to reveal her breasts, full and eager for his touch. He leaned down, his tongue flicking lightly over one peak, then another, drawing a sharp gasp from her. A wave of pure pleasure washed over Alara, her fingers tangling in his dark hair, holding him close as he suckled gently, exquisitely, sending tremors through her core. Her own hands were not idle. She explored the planes of his back, the firm muscles of his shoulders, the curve of his waist. She felt the strength of him, the barely contained power, and it thrilled her. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes were dark with passion, his breath rugged. "You consume me, Alara," he whispered, his voice raw. She met his gaze, her own eyes shining with a mixture of desire and profound affection. "And you, Julian, have awakened something in me I didn't know existed." He shed the rest of his clothes with a swiftness that belied his earlier languor. And then, he was there. Fully, magnificently male, bathed in the moonlight. He moved over her, his weight supported by his arms, his hips resting between her thighs. The warmth of his skin against hers, the subtle friction of their bodies, was an exquisite torment. He kissed her again, deeply, passionately, his tongue mimicking the ancient dance they were about to perform. His hand found the delicate lace of her panties, slipping beneath the fabric, his fingers teasing, exploring, finding the most sensitive part of her. Alara arched into his touch, a low moan escaping her lips, her body trembling with anticipation. "Ready, Aintasore?" he whispered, his voice a husky plea. "More than ready," she breathed, her eyes wide with a mixture of longing and trust. He entered her then, slowly, deliberately, giving her time to adjust, to embrace him fully. A soft gasp escaped her lips, a sensation of pure, unadulterated pleasure blossoming within her. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer, deeper, until they were perfectly joined, two halves made whole. The rhythm began, slow and languid at first, building steadily, inexorably, towards a crescendo. Each thrust was an affirmation, a deeper intertwining not just of bodies but of souls. Alara surrendered completely, letting go of all her carefully constructed defenses, allowing herself to be swept away by the raw, beautiful power of their connection. She met his gaze, saw the unbridled passion, the tenderness, the love reflected there, and she knew with an absolute certainty that this was where she was meant to be. Her body responded with an intensity she had never known, every nerve ending alive, every muscle tensed with pleasure. The whispers of Villadoro now roared in her ears, singing a song of ancient love and new beginnings. The tension built, a glorious, exquisite pressure that tightened in her core, spiraling outwards, consuming her. Julian's pace quickened, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his body a taut, magnificent sculpture in the moonlight. She cried out his name, a primal sound of release, as the first wave of pleasure broke over her, shattering her into a million brilliant pieces. He followed moments later, a guttural groan escaping his lips as he found his own release, pouring himself into her, his body trembling, his head collapsing onto her shoulder. They lay there, breathless, entwined, the aftershocks of their passion rippling through them. Slowly, the world recomposed itself. The moonlight still streamed through the window. The cypress trees still stood sentinel, but everything felt profoundly changed. Julian shifted, pulling her closer, tucking her head beneath his chin, his arm a secure weight around her. "Elar," he murmured, his voice still thick with emotion. I think I'm falling in love with you." Her heart swelled, tears pricking at her eyes. It was a confession she had been longing to hear, a truth she had already recognized in her own heart. She tilted her head, looking up at him, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I think I'm already there, Julian," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm already in love with you." A profound sense of peace settled over them, a quiet certainty that transcended words. They talked then, in soft whispers, of the future. Elar spoke of her life in London, her career, the commitments she had. Julian listened, his gaze unwavering, understanding. "Your life isn't something to be discarded, tesoro," he said gently. "It's part of who you are, but perhaps it can expand, perhaps it can include this." He gestured vaguely around the room, to the villa, to their shared world. Ilara thought of her structured existence, her perfectly ordered flat, her predictable days. And then she thought of Julian, of the warmth of his skin, the depth of his eyes, the exhilarating wildness he had awakened in her. She thought of the ancient whispers of Villa d'Oro, no longer just a romantic notion, but a resonant truth. "It can," she said, her voice firm, resolute. "It must." She realized then that this wasn't about choosing between two lives, but about integrating them, allowing one to enrich the other. Her architectural eye could find new inspiration here, in the ancient lines of the villa, in the organic curves of the landscape. Her passion for creation could flourish in this vibrant, inspiring setting. "I don't know all the details," she admitted, a small, joyous laugh bubbling up. "My life is about to become gloriously, wonderfully messy." Julian chuckled, pulling her closer still. "Messy is good, Alara. Messy is real. We'll figure it out together. The world is a much smaller place than it used to be. London isn't so far from Tuscany." He kissed her forehead, a soft, lingering kiss that sealed their unspoken promise. "And this villa, Ilara," he continued, his voice resonating with deep emotion, "it has waited a long time for you. For your spirit, your light. The whispers, they were telling me you were coming." And Ilara, for the first time in a long time, felt utterly, thrillingly alive, not just in this moment, but for all the moments yet to come. She felt rooted, connected, cherished. The whispers of Villa d'Oro had indeed spoken of love, of destiny, of a future she hadn't dared to dream of. And as she lay in Julian's arms, bathed in the soft Tuscan moonlight, she knew, with an absolute certainty, that her journey had finally led her home. This ancient villa, this passionate man, this awakened heart, this was her new beginning, a symphony of love played out under the timeless gaze of the Italian stars.